Hi, everyone. Crista Cowan here with another episode of the Barefoot Genealogist. And this is episode 4, I think, in our series of Between the Leaves, which is a behind the scenes look at how we do things here at Ancestry. If you remember, in episode 2, we talked to Quentin Atkinson from the content acquisition team about how Ancestry gets access to historical records. In episode 3, we talked to Sally from our imaging team about how Ancestry scans records. And today we're going to talk about how Ancestry indexes records. So I'm going to invite our guest on, and while she's coming on, let me introduce her. Lisa Harris-Cook is a program manager on our content strategy team. Lisa, hi.
Hi, I'm super excited.
Thank you so much for joining me today. So let's just start off. Let's just dive right in, right? We've only got 15 minutes. Let's talk a little bit about your background, your time here at Ancestry, how long you've been here, what jobs you've held, what brought you here.
So I think over the past couple episodes, you've had some pretty long tenured people. Quentin with his 25 years and Sally well over 10. I'm the young one, I guess, of the group so far. I've been here for about 8 years. I was working as a project manager for healthcare. I have been a long time amateur genealogist and had always thought, oh, it'd be so cool to just do that as my job. But I was project manager, whatever. And then I had a bad day at work and got frustrated. And so I applied on our corporate website. And lo and behold, I became a project manager at Ancestry. And it's been the happiest 8 years I've had so far.
Well, there you go.
So I was a project manager for about 5 years, and now I'm a program manager with our strategy team.
So tell us a little bit about what the difference is between a project manager and a program manager.
Sure. And this is kind of one of the areas we haven't touched on a bunch, and we don't frequently. We talk a lot about the processes our records move through, but we don't talk about the project management team, which is actually a group of people who kind of shepherds the records all the way through. So once the acquisitionist signs a deal, they will hand it off to the project manager who walks it through the imaging, indexing, and publishing pipelines, and then has a little bit of a relationship with the archive and the users afterwards if there are concerns or issues with how things have been published. So that's the team I started out on. I did a lot of international content. A bunch of our German records were the first ones that I brought to the site. And then after a few years of doing that, I've moved into program management. So now I work with kind of our marketing teams and our product teams to sort of showcase our records and help our users find really cool discoveries and have a good understanding of what they can get out of them.
Yep. So for the benefit of our audience, Lisa and I meet together about once a week or once every other week just to go over what the new content is that's coming soon. She's the one who helps me make sure I'm on track for the What's New at Ancestry updates and the Facebook Lives that I do every other week. She helped me through the launch of the 1950 census as I was trying to keep you all updated. So that is her role, and she does it well. So,
and I think you probably get a little sick of me, but you can't.
Nope, not even a little bit. Well, today we're going to talk about how Ancestry indexes records. So we talked to Quentin about how we acquire them. Sally told us about how we image them. Now, I know some records come to us already in digital form, like the 1950 census was already imaged when we acquired it. Some records then also go through the Ancestry imaging process if we get them in microfilm form or book form. But no matter what, regardless of how those images come to us, at some point we need to make those images searchable. And that's where the indexing process comes in. So can you tell us just a little bit, like an overview of the indexing process?
Yeah, there are actually a couple of different pathways we can take when we're indexing, depending on the type of content that we have. Our most standard traditional version is a vendor transcription where we have almost a dozen partners that we work with, and we provide them sort of a document outlining what is in the records and what we want them to capture from there. And then they have thousands of people who key those records for us and deliver them back. And there's an audit process for that. We use that for most content where it's a lot of different types of forms or paragraph text where it's really difficult to kind of get in there and see what's in the records. It's not super formulaic. For things that are printed matter that are really formulaic, like city directories or something like that, we use an OCR, an optical character recognition process. And that one's kind of interesting because when we first started, the technology was pretty basic. And so you would put in your page of text and you would literally get out an extraction that is just how the computer interpreted the markings on the page into an alphanumeric digital version. And as we've all seen with newspapers and other things like that, sometimes it does a great job. Sometimes it doesn't do a very good job at all.
I used to call it a bag of words, and sometimes it was just a bag of letters.
Yes, and sometimes those letters don't make any sense at all, right? And with that style, you really could only do like a keyword search, right? So you might be putting in a name. It might come up as a place. It might come up as a river. Who knows what it is, right? It's just whatever word you put in. In the last 5 to 10 years, I think we've improved that technology so that now not only is it reading those characters, but it with the dictionaries and with these formulaic texts where you can kind of give it a diagram, you can tell it, I want you to pick up the stuff in this space that looks like this and map it to a dictionary, and those are going to be names. So that people can search for a name or they can search for a date or something like that. That's a little more search friendly, hint friendly than just a keyword or any word.
So for example, one of the collections that I think we used OCR, fielded OCR on is our yearbook collection, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so when it's reading a page, that page may have the name of a club and some students' names and a page number. And in traditional OCR, it would have just picked up all of those words and treated every word as if it was an individual entity, no relationship to each other, and keyword fielded. Now we can actually field a first name and a last name and a location. And based on the yearbook, we can add possibly a date or even an approximate age that we can calculate on the back end because we know what class section of the yearbook they're in, right?
Yes.
Okay,
such a better experience for our users, right? And
Yeah.
one of the things we can do with that too is like with yearbooks where we can pinpoint where a photo is too.
Yeah. Okay. And so we've got vendor keyed, and you mentioned we have dozens of partners or a dozen partners that we work with. Those are professional indexers who this is their job. We have the OCR, which has become a little bit more advanced with the fielded OCR. And now artificial intelligence has kind of changed everything, right?
Yep, that's our new big game changer in the field, right? So in the past, it's been project by project that we do indexing, whether that's traditional vendor or OCR. And now we're moving into this wave of the future, which is basically a step up from OCR. And you're teaching a computer to read this record, and you're teaching it how to read handwriting instead of just a printed text. And it gets smarter the more you do it, and the more information you feed it. And so hopefully in the future, that means we'll be able to index a whole lot more records a whole lot more quickly.
Yeah, so I know all of you who are watching, if you've been paying attention, you probably know that's how we indexed the 1950 census, was we used handwriting recognition and ran it through. Of course, then we did this additional step in partnership with Family Search, where their volunteers have gone through and reviewed that handwriting recognition index that was generated so that we could have corrections as necessary. But yeah, it is. I was impressed. I was beyond impressed with how the 1950 census project turned out. I don't know if you felt good about it or not, but I was, from an outside perspective, it was amazing.
I think there were a lot of us within the company who were like, if this works, it's going to be amazing. And if it doesn't work, it's going to be horrible. And there were a lot of very happy people over here, I think. And hopefully a lot of very happy users too.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so tell us, what are some of the challenges that your team, in content encounters when you're indexing records? Are there things that are game stoppers or show stoppers? Are there things that just make things more difficult? Some things that are just speed bumps along the way?
Well, when you think about the records that we have on our site, right, there's such a wide variety. We've got census records where you have 50 records in lines on a page and it's a beautiful form and everything's in the right spot as long as the enumerator did their job. Or then you look at some old parish records that are 500 years old and they're written in old secretary hand that nobody can even read these. I mean, nobody knows cursive anymore. Do they know old secretary hand? Come on. And so it's part of the job of our indexing department is to actually go through those records before we send them off to a vendor, before we put them through OCR, and to look through the images as much as possible and identify the different types of things we're going to see in there. What languages will there be? What pieces of information are important that we want to make sure we capture? What anomalies do we see if somebody put something in the wrong place, or, oh, this column is supposed to be for death date, but they used it as their information or other remarks column, stuff like that. And we set up like a whole document of exactly how we hope we find the records, and we send them through to be indexed. And as they're indexed, we get questions that come through of, this doesn't match what you said it would look like. What do you want us to do with it? I think one of my favorite examples with some of our international records were we did Romanian records, and we planned that in the Romanian records we would find German, Latin, and Hungarian, or German, Romanian, and Hungarian, and that's what we put in our instructions. And it was a multi-year project, and I would say about every month for the first couple years or first year we just found a new language.
Oh no!
What do you want us to do with these? So I think by the time we finished, there were 6 or 7 languages in there, including Hebrew, Latin, French, Old Cyrillic that even the people on our team who speak Russian couldn't decipher. And who knows what else was in there that we didn't catch. But things like that will pop up, and sometimes they'll delay us as we try to figure out what to do with them. Sometimes we'll end up, because of time deadlines, having to say, well, we'll go back and get to that later. And we're just going to keep going with what we have right now. And sometimes it slips through all the way until it gets on the site, and then somebody comes to us and says, why didn't you index these? Well, we didn't know they were there. We'd happily get them now if we can. So
yeah, it's interesting because when Quentin and I were talking, he was talking about how sometimes the archives don't even know what record sets they have. And so now you see it at a much more granular level by the time it gets to indexing. Once we get into a record set and we think we know what's in it, we don't even always know what's in it.
Well, and even in just one language set that should be very formulaic, like I mentioned, the enumerator maybe just didn't fill out the form the way he was supposed to, and so the people who are indexing it are trying to figure out exactly where to put this information and how to capture it. And so it's always a little bit. It's a challenge and a surprise. And I think we feel really good when we manage to catch things, and we feel bad when we don't. But we're always trying to improve. We're always trying to make sure that we get everything out of there that we can. And we're not afraid to go back sometimes if we've missed something.
So let's talk about re-indexing. Yes, if you've missed something in a record set, but are there other circumstances under which Ancestry ever goes back and re-indexes records?
We actually, we have a couple of examples from this year. We regularly do what we call improvement projects, where we'll take existing databases, and one of the members of my team is very familiar with our catalog, very savvy with records, has her credential in genealogy, and she goes through our catalog on a regular basis to look at things that we could make more interesting to users or help them find better discoveries. We just went through our US passenger lists in the last year to add additional fields. It might not have necessarily been new people that weren't found before, but new pieces of information that might have gotten overlooked if you didn't actually go try to decipher the record yourself or the image yourself. We have a very popular collection in Canada, the Drouin collection of births, marriages, and deaths. That's one of the first collections we indexed for Canada back in the day when we had very little budget and very much smaller networks and a lot less insight on how to index. And so we did a very light touch key on it where we I think we keyed the name, date, and place from the column of the paragraph graph of text. And obviously that's not a great user experience. In a lot of cases, the names were abbreviations or the date that was over there didn't actually match the date of the event. So we've actually over the last year and a half been going through and re-indexing that entire collection to pull out the names of family and spouses that we missed and to correct the names that we may have not gotten complete names for, update the dates, make sure we have the right events. I think we've more than doubled the number of records in that collection because there were so many that we missed the first time. So especially with some of our older collections, there's a lot of room for improvement, and we try to weigh which ones will be the most useful for our users and will have the most impact on our subscribers. I think we all wish we could do more at a time than we can, but that balance between improving what we already have and bringing new content onto the site, we want to make sure there's always something for somebody to discover when they come on a site.
Yeah, and you guys, I don't envy your job. It's a difficult job to make that balance appropriate, but I think you do it well. So with all that said, what is the scope of this work that you're doing? Like how many records a year is Ancestry indexing, or how do you measure all of this?
I mean, it varies from year to year, but in general, you could say that there are thousands of people working every day to bring hundreds of millions of records to our site each year. So it's kind of the overall encapsulation of how it goes. And we scale up, we scale down, we do what we have to bring those records out as quickly
and
as
you do it well. So I just want to point out that even though we are investing millions and millions and millions of dollars into getting these records indexed, into sometimes going back and re-indexing records, that there is a portion of the records on the site that are available for free for various reasons. Some because we've partnered, like the 1950 census, with Family Search and their volunteers to correct that index. Some we do through philanthropic efforts to make records from at-risk populations more readily available. Do you have a favorite data set in that category?
I really love that we have made it a priority to preserve at-risk history. And as part of that, I've worked very closely with some of our Holocaust records and some of the records of the enslaved. The Arles Archives collection is really close to my heart. I was actually the project manager for that when we started the project, and then I moved into program manager and got to work with marketing as we were releasing that to the public. And I think a lot of the record sets that we have been able to bring out, they can answer so many questions for people who have just gaping holes in the history, and they can tell the stories of people who otherwise would be forgotten. And that is really meaningful to me. I really appreciate that that's something our company values, and that's a value of the employees that I work with.
Yeah, thank you. That was beautifully said. Well, my last question was going to be, what's your favorite thing about working here? But I think you may have just answered at least part of that, right? Anything else you want to add?
I'll just say what I've said a lot of times to friends when I've talked about genealogy, because I've been doing this since I was a kid. To me, this is a business, yes, but for me, the names that we uncover as we index records, they're not just words on a page. They're not just characters or names. Those are people, and they're their stories. And I love being a part of getting to bring those forward and share them with their descendants.
Yeah, the connections that can be made are amazing. In fact, Lisa and I just made a connection today. We had lunch together today before we hopped online here and discovered that her husband and I are fifth cousins. So I'm related to her kids. So fun. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Lisa. I appreciate you being here. Hopefully we can have you again on some other time about some other topic, because I know how passionate you are about family history.
I would love it. Thank you so much.
See you later. Well,
Bye.
everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. That's all I have for you. 2 weeks from now, I will be back, same time, same place, and we will talk about what happens after indexing. There is one more step that the records go through before they are published online and made fully searchable for you. So please join us again in 2 weeks. Until next time, I'm Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.